The two peaks in the distance are Gropilor 2063 meters and Rebra 2119. Right behind them I put another point on the map marking the route on which we were to move towards the east. The weather was excellent from the very morning. The sun quickly moved higher and warmed us with its bright rays, quickly drying the remnants of morning dew on the glade flooded with its light. Using the existing infrastructure, we made a truly royal breakfast, starting from flakes with milk through scrambled eggs, sandwiches with Krakowska sausage and cherry tomatoes, and of course with the obligatory black American coffee. I love breakfast in such places. As far as the eye can see, only nature surrounds us, like an undisturbed carpet in all possible shades of green, where you can watch lazily crawling shadows of the clouds hanging on the azure sky. We continued our journey shortly after 11 a.m. Initially, we followed the trail of Romul, Zavoiele Borcuciuli, Șiaua Bătrâni. The forest road, meandering picturesquely in the shade of coniferous trees, growing less and less on the slopes, was not a special challenge. From time to time, we encountered natural obstacles in the form of logs of wood blocking the trail, which, however, we were able to remove using our own muscles. Sometimes the slope of the trail was a perfect scenery for capturing our struggles in photos, also those using Viola as a counterweight standing on the rock slider on the left side of the car, definitely overloaded on the right. As often, the footage does not reflect the seriousness of the situation, and it was probably far from it, but it's better to be safe than sorry. After several dozen minutes of slow driving on a bumpy and sometimes muddy trail, we finally saw an unobstructed view of the higher parts of the Rodna Mountains.
That's good living. That's good living.
Entering the mountain meadows along the main ridge road of the Rodna Mountains, a long pass between Rotunda and Setrev, we encountered a team from Germany, going in the same direction. Kira, who was running behind the car, decided to say hello to the travelers, which we had not noticed before and only realized when we lost sight of her in the rearview mirrors. All because at that time Viola was practicing off-road driving and we were focused on her struggles with the terrain. When we returned, we saw Kira resting in front of one of the jeeps and not particularly concerned about our short absence. After a quick introduction, we were served with a beer, smoked an occasional cigarette, and headed our way.
Let's go and make some sweet, sweet memories. Think of every dream you have and make it true. Let the world feel the happiness that you're giving. And that's good living. That's good living. That's good living. That's good living. That's good. Standing at the crossroads, wondering which way to go. That's good. Past is behind me, future is an open road. Yeah, that's good living.
There are places where it is impossible not to stop for a moment. Even when the wind wants to tear off your head, making it colder outside than it might seem, clouds gather on the horizon, which should rather encourage one to seek shelter and not to expose yourself to the vagaries of the weather. But these are the views we look for on our trips. And in such places, simple meal tastes best. These are moments of respite for us and Kira. These are moments when you can stop literally, but also mentally, focusing on simple activities related to satisfying physical and aesthetic hunger. When we feed ourselves with the views of the nature that surrounds us and its wonderful change in time. Even the beauty treatments that Kira endures much worse on a daily basis, impatient after a few strokes of the brush on her soft fur, here seem as pleasant as a visit to a luxurious spa. At home, the hair spinning everywhere make us dizzy on a daily basis. Here, it just brings a smile to your face. Because these simple activities are a sign of taking care of each other. And this mutual concern is a way to show how important we are to each other. And there's nothing more beautiful than sharing such views with loved ones. After spending a moment with the tourist we had met, we were warned that we should be prepared to change our plans because the further road might not be possible. All thanks to the snow, which, here and there, in white patches, flows down the slopes and lies on the trail. Observing the area from a distance, we did not have the impression that it could be an insurmountable obstacle. The slopes were quite steep, but the white plain seemed as if there would always be a detour. After all, it's June, not the middle of winter, and snow shouldn't be our biggest concern. However, as we approached the area where the road was completely covered with snow, and there was no tree around that could serve as an anchor point for our winch to help us overcome this obstruction, we began to realize that we may indeed have to turn back. Studying the topography of the visible traces, we realized that overcoming this seemingly insignificant pile of snow can be quite a challenge. Looking closely, we saw that the snow cover is quite thick. The ground on the left side of the road not only wet but also quite steep, which posed the risk of sliding down the slope or even rolling over. Visible traces told us that someone had already tried to pass this way and that he was not successful. What's more, there were signs of a pretty good fight in the terrain, which started to raise our doubts. Having a drone at my disposal, I decided to use it this time for a purely reconnaissance flight and check if it was possible to overcome this place on the right side of the hill. Some traces were initially visible, but as they increased in height, it turned out that they ended in a clump of dwarf vegetation. And when there was none, it was too steep to drive with the car. Especially that our right side was heavier and significantly increased the risk of rollover, which we wanted to avoid at all costs. Places that were relatively flat and devoid of vegetation allowed, at most, to overcome this hill on foot, but we could forget about driving. The entire hill was covered with dense mountain pine and forced us to stick to the original plan. And this one was an attempt to drive around the obstacle on the left side of the hill. The depth of the furrow we have covered showed how boggy the terrain was. The tracks, roughly in 1/3 of the length of our obstacle, turning sharply down the slope, said that at best we could finish sane. It's just that we are alone here and we will not be able to use help of another car if necessary. Tilting the car to the left side made our hearts beat faster, but our defender was surprisingly bravely coping with the next meters of terrain, which we were feared so much. And when it seemed that the whole operation would end up with a completely seamless detour, I felt that the rear diff had plunged into the ground. Decided to back off slightly to gain some momentum and get back on the trail as far as it was safe to do so, although this position of the sandy was by no means safe anymore. Unfortunately, gravity did its job, and the ambitious plan turned out to be impossible at this stage. Reversing with the awareness of the steep slope behind the car, poor grip and instability of the surface was not the most comfortable operation, especially when the car collapses to the left side. However, as much as possible, I tried to gain momentum to be able to propel the car and overcome this steep slope. I went out a few times looking for the best track, but the terrain didn't allow much, and the winch under those circumstances was utterly useless. The only thing left was to fight the terrain and rely on the off-road bravery of the Defender itself. However, the snow in the front and the sharp ridge slowed down the car abruptly and did not allow the tires to bite the ground hard enough. Each time it seemed that we were almost on the trail, and each time we were almost in the same place, only a few dozen centimeters away, and the farther we moved, the steeper it got. We didn't have much choice, however, and the hunch that we were almost succeeding gave us faith in the final victory, so I decided not to let go. Which, in the end, turned out to be a good decision, and the adrenaline, accumulated for several minutes, could finally find an outlet through my throat. So we passed. We both felt a great relief, and we both knew we didn't want to go back that way again. Because if you tried to overcome this terrain in a similar way, the car would tilt to the right, and that 100% would end in a rollover. So no, we must go on. The sky is brightening, the area seems friendly despite numerous furrows carved by the water rushing through here during the thaw, but its vastness gives us hope that it can only get better from now. Even places like this, where I felt that the front left wheel had landed in the air for a while, so the Defender exceeded its maximum axle articulation, did not disturb us. As long as there is flat and hard ground, we'll be fine.
Tak to z daleka wyglądało lekko, droga sobie idzie, nie?
And so, as I said in the video, it seemed from a distance that it would be a pleasant ride through the peaks. The road just meanders between them lazily and does not look hostile from far in any way. But nope. It couldn't have worked. And that part was too dangerous to risk any farther travel. So, full of fear, we were forced to retreat. I had a racing mind in my head. How could you drive this section differently? Was there any better place that I might have missed? How to set the car at a safe angle to the slope? Or maybe try to drive over the snow? The moment we nearly flipped over on the day 2 was embedded in my head and only fueled my fears. With every major tilt, and if the camera had inertia, it would look like this. I felt it would not be an easy task. On the right side, we have most of the equipment and luggage. We are heavier there. It doesn't bode well. But, as we have no choice, we have to pass this way. And that's it. From this perspective, it seemed to be enough to keep the right wheel on the edge and try to get as far as possible. Then we think about what to do next. I opened the window and drove slowly onto the grass with the right side of the car.
No dawaj. Dawaj tak jak stałaś wtedy, wiesz, musisz się odchylić do tyłu.
Viola stepped on the rock slider and acted as a counterweight. I moved forward slowly, feeling that the snow was dragging the car into the snowdrift. The first attempt ended with pulling us off the edge to the left. At this moment,
Stoi, tak jak stoi.
I realized how deep the snow cover is below us. The car tilted dangerously to the right, but Viola was leaning hard to the left for the entire reach of her arms. We have to try withdraw and get better position, closer to the right. It will not be an easy job.
Zsunąłem się, zjechałem, wiesz, za blisko tego.
Everything seemed to be going well until I felt this.
O kurwa. O kurwa, to...
Nie idź do przodu, bo tam była taka jebana dziura, że masakra.
Spokojnie.
We were stuck for good. Couldn't move a centimeter, neither forward nor back. The wheels were hopelessly spinning in place, throwing out loose elements of the ground and sinking us more and more. I quickly gave up trying to free myself with the use of a gas, and I realized that we would probably stay here longer. But more on that in the next episode.